In the annals of history, there are often chapters that remain shrouded in mystery, obscured by the passage of time or deliberate attempts to erase them. Such is the case with the dark, untold history that Arabs have tried to erase. In this video, we will delve deep into this intriguing and often overlooked aspect of history, shedding light on the hidden truths and uncovering the facts that have been buried for centuries. So, let's dive into the video and subscribe to the channel. The 25th of March was, as usual, commemorated as the day Britain officially abolished its slave trade in 1807. But how many recall that Arab slavers were the first and last in modern times to ship millions of Africans out of the continent as slaves? The Arab history of anti-black racism predates European anti-black racism by several centuries. The early Islamic Empire exhibited all the characteristics of anti-black racism, and blacks suffered the lowest form of bondage. Europeans took photographs of chained black African slaves in Arab slave trading vessels on the east coast of Africa in the 1880s. Slavery persisted openly in Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries in the latter half of the 20th century, 100 years after slavery was abolished in the United States. In the 1960s, African Muslims sometimes sold slaves to finance pilgrimages. Arab nations were slow to abolish slavery, with Saudi Arabia and Yemen doing so in 1962, the United Arab Emirates in 1963, and Oman in 1970. Mauritania still has hereditary racial slavery, despite official attempts to end it. In 1981, Mauritania abolished slavery by decree, but didn't pass criminal laws to enforce the ban. Under international pressure in 2007, a law allowed prosecution of slaveholders, but it's rarely enforced. More activists than white masters have been prosecuted. Slavers are offered compensation, while victims receive nothing. In 2015, Mauritania established special courts to prosecute slavery, but has tried very few cases. In a dark chapter of history, Arab slavers subjected African male captives to castration, preventing them from reproducing. This brutality, driven by a thirst for economic power and control, marked the Arab slave trade. While slavery in the Americas allowed marriage, Arab slaves endured unimaginable suffering. Castration during the Arab slave trade left lasting trauma for individuals and their families. Slavery, defined as reducing humans to chattels, justified the shipping of millions of Africans to Asia and the Americas, a brutal practice by both Arabs and Europeans. The African slave trade, a tragic episode in history, originated when Mediterranean civilizations from Europe and the Middle East intervened in sub-Saharan Africa. Slavery predates the Americas' discovery, but the Atlantic shift caused explosive growth. Slavery was central in Mediterranean societies like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, and Islamic regions. Medieval Europe sourced slaves from Bosnia's Adriatic coast, with the term slave derived from sklavus, the inhabitants. Bosnia, due to terrain and clan warfare, supplied slaves to Mediterranean markets via Ragusa, Dubrovnik. Venetian merchants then shipped Slavs as slaves to the Islamic world for about 250 years, between the Battle of Poitiers in 732 and the import of black Africans around 1000 AD. The number of people enslaved by Muslims has been a contentious issue, especially when considering the millions of Africans forcibly taken from their homes. As Arab control extended over much of Africa, they began capturing young boys and girls, selling them into slavery within Africa, or transporting them across the Indian Ocean to regions like Indonesia, China, Southwest Asia, and India. By the 10th century, The demand for African slaves as plantation workers, sex slaves, domestics, and warriors had surged, leading to an estimated 5,000 Africans being shipped out annually. Historian Paul Lovejoy estimates around 9.85 million Africans were enslaved by Arabs, with about 7.25 million shipped between 1600 and 1800, and an additional 1.2 million in the 19th century alone. Some historians believe that between AD 650 and 1900, 10 to 20 million people were enslaved by Arab traders. Dr. John Alambella Azuma estimates over 80 million black people died during this brutal trade, marked by cruelty, beatings, and grueling desert journeys before being sold in slave markets across the Muslim world, including Cairo, Baghdad, Istanbul, and Mecca. These African slaves suffered unspeakable horrors under Arab rule. They were used as servants, laborers, and even as cannon fodder in armies. British explorer Henry Hamilton Johnston documented how many died in the desert, while those who fell ill or couldn't keep up were brutally killed by their masters. David Livingstone, the British missionary, described the abhorrent conditions he witnessed in 1870, where emaciated men, women, and children were tethered with heavy sticks and cruel bark thongs. Slaves endured extreme brutality, with women and even infants suffering unimaginable violence at the hands of slave drivers. Black Africans did not enjoy immunity to many of the diseases found in the Arab world, which also resulted in high death rates. In West Africa, the Arab slave trade encompassed a vast region from the Niger Valley to the Gulf of Guinea. Here is the testimony of the German explorer Gustav Nachtigall. The poor children of the black country seemed to meet death here at the last stage of a long, hopeless, and painful journey. The long journey accomplished with insufficient food and scarce water. The contrast between the rich natural resources and the humid atmosphere of their homeland and the dry and anemic air of the desert. The fatigue and the privations imposed by their masters and by the circumstances in which they find themselves. All this has gradually ruined their young strengths. The memory of their homeland that has disappeared along the way. Their fear of an unknown future. The endless journey under the blows. In the Saharan region alone, more than 9 million African captives were deported, and 2 million died on the roads. This despicable phenomenon was legitimized by Islam, as Christianity would later condone the transatlantic slave trade. For example, the Tunisian Arab historian Ibn Khaldun, from 1332 to 1406, wrote that the only peoples to accept slavery are the Negroes, because of their lower degree of humanity, their place being closer to the animal stage. Another one, the Algerian Arab theologian Ahmed al-Wansharisi, from 1431 to 1508, offered legal and religious recommendations. This he said, "I have been asked about slaves from the land of Abyssinia who profess monotheism and accept the rules of the Holy Law. Is it legal or not to buy and sell them? If their conversion to Islam comes after the establishment of a property right on these slaves, then Islam does not demand liberation because slavery was caused by unbelief. The state of servitude persists after the disappearance of unbelief because of its existence in the past." The Arab slave trade was characterized by appalling violence, rape, and worst of all, castration of black male slaves. While African women and girls were targeted, captured, and deported by Arab slavers for use as sex slaves, the male captives were, on the other hand, petly castrated to prevent them from reproducing, and becoming a stock castration of male slaves became a habit among slave traders due to the fact that they were in higher demand, stronger noted to work faster and more efficiently, and were not a threat to slave masters and owners who feared that their wives, concubines, and female slaves would have affairs with them. The suffering inflicted on the victims of castration was profound, encompassing physical and psychological trauma. Castration was done to boys between the ages of 9 and 12, as it was believed that they survived the process more than an adult or adolescent. 1. Economic factors. One of the primary reasons for castrating male captives was economic. The exporting countries had good economic incentives to castrate male slaves before they were shipped off. In the medieval slaving industry that was designed for exporting Slavic prisoners of war to the Arab world, castrating the slaves was an integral part of the process. Castration was then performed in the famous castration houses in Venice. Eunuchs or castrated male slaves were highly sought after due to their perceived trustworthiness and reliability. Eunuchs were considered valuable commodities in Arab societies, thus fetching much higher prices in slave markets compared to non-castrated slaves. Their lack of reproductive capability meant that they could serve in positions of trust and authority without posing a threat to the owner's hereditary wealth and power. Eunuchs were often employed in sensitive positions such as harem guards, administrative posts, and as servants in elite households. This practice had persisted for centuries in the Arab slave trade. As late as 1903, there were still 194 African eunuchs in service to the Ottoman ruling family. 2. Control and domination. Castration was employed by Arab slavers as a means of exerting control and dominance over their male captives. By removing their ability to procreate, the slavers aimed to eliminate any potential threats of rebellion or the establishment of rival lineages. In regions where castration was prevalent, such as East Africa and the Sudan, entire villages were affected as young men were captured and subjected to this brutal practice. Many eunuchs who served in the harem of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul remained in servitude for life, isolated from their African roots. Their roles as loyal servants or guards sometimes meant they were isolated from their own cultural backgrounds and communities for life. Young boys were captured and castrated so that when they grew up, they could serve as eunuchs in harems. This slave ship was photographed in 1896. This large group of young boys may have been destined for castration to serve as eunuchs. The slaves in the photograph were headed to a Muslim country well after the American Civil War. In fact, slavery in the United States was a good bit more humane than slavery in the Arab world. It was bloody for Africans, bloody beyond words. In some cases, African societies would engage in castration as a preemptive measure to protect their youth from being captured and castrated by Arab slave traders. This reflects the deep fear and trauma associated with this practice. 4. Psychological and physical trauma. Castration was itself a traumatic experience, both physically and psychologically, for those subjected to it. The surgery itself was often performed without anesthesia under crude and unhygienic conditions, leading to excruciating pain and a high risk of infection. Many African boys did not survive their castration surgery. 6 out of every 10 people who were mutilated died from their wounds in castration centers. This is a prime reason why there are not many communities of blacks living in the non-African Muslim world today. Despite the millions of black African slaves who were sold into the Muslim world, castration led to hormonal imbalances on survivors, affecting the physical development and health of victims. Without testosterone, eunuchs often suffered from various health issues such as decreased muscle mass, fatigue, obesity, osteoporosis, and a lack of secondary sexual characteristics. 5. Cultural and religious beliefs. Some societies believed that castrated individuals were spiritually pure and more suitable for certain religious duties. For instance, in some Islamic societies, eunuchs were considered more appropriate for guarding holy sites. The guardianship of the Holy Kaaba in Mecca included the use of African eunuchs. Some men were castrated to be eunuchs in domestic service, and the practice of neutering male slaves was not limited to only black males. The Caliphate in Baghdad at the beginning of the 10th century had 70 black eunuchs and 40 white eunuchs in his palace, writes author Ronald Siegel in his 2002 book, Islam's Black Slaves, The Other Black Diaspora. In the Arab world, demand for castrated slaves was so high that even with the appalling death rate from the procedure, it was still profitable, which explains why there is no large African diaspora community in Arab countries. Castrated men don't father children. The Arab slave trade had a tragic impact on the evolution of African societies. Some areas were completely devastated and depopulated. Welsh explorer Henry Morton Stanley, from 1841 to 1904, was a horrified witness of this traffic. He wrote that after the depredations of the Arab traffickers, the black blood flows toward the north. The equator smells corpses. The United Nations has made March 23, the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade, and UNESCO has made August 23, the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its Abolition. When will there be an international day to commemorate the victims of the Arab-Muslim slave trade? When will an international research program address this subject? When will a project be implemented to identify, restore, and publicize the sites and monuments linked to this Arab trade, like the existing projects concerning the transatlantic trade? When will educational material be produced and cultural and artistic programs conducted to raise awareness of this criminal activity? When will a museum on the Arab-Muslim slave trade be established? Among the many intriguing facets of Arab history are the mysterious lost cities that lie hidden beneath the shifting sands. These enigmatic urban centers hold secrets waiting to be unearthed, providing a tantalizing glimpse into the lives of those who once walked their streets. One cannot explore Arab history without acknowledging the pivotal role played by Arabian merchants on the Silk Road. These enterprising traders connected the East and West, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures. Their journeys stretched across vast expanses, traversing deserts and mountains, forging connections that would shape the course of history. The Islamic Golden Age stands as a testament to the Arab world's contributions to human knowledge and progress. Arab scholars made groundbreaking strides in fields such as mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, preserving and enhancing the wisdom of antiquity while also making significant advancements. The Arab world's resistance to the Crusades is a chapter that vividly illustrates the determination and valor of its people. The Crusades, a series of religiously motivated wars, brought foreign invaders to Arab lands, leading to heroic and enduring resistance movements. The influence of the Ottoman Empire on Arab culture, politics, and society is another pivotal aspect of Arab history. The legacy of this powerful empire continues to shape the region in profound ways, reminding us that history, with its complexities and nuances, is an essential part of our collective identity and informs our path forward. The dark, untold history the Arabs have tried to erase offers a fascinating glimpse into the multifaceted history of the Arab world. From ancient civilizations to contemporary challenges, this article has uncovered narratives that deserve recognition. As we reflect on this journey, let us remember that history, whether dark or bright, shapes our present and future. Embracing the past with an open heart and a quest for understanding is the first step towards a brighter future. This brings us to the end of this video segment. And did you happen to learn a thing or two? If so, then don't forget to like the video, share with your families and friends, and subscribe to keep the channel growing. Thank you for watching.